Imagine being left alone at a diner at 17, your family driving away without a word, like you were invisible. Hi, I'm Emma, and that night changed everything for me. Years later, I returned to that same town, not as the girl they abandoned, but as the woman they never saw coming. What happened when I showed up at the reunion? They begged me for forgiveness, but I had a message of my own. Before we dive into the story, if you're enjoying these meaningful stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more. Now, let's start the story together. I stood frozen outside the diner, the cold autumn air biting through my thin jacket. The familiar hum of the busy roadside eatery felt distant, almost surreal, as I watched their car vanish around the curve. It wasn't a prank. They had really left me behind. The weight of disbelief pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. My fingers curled tightly around the strap of my bag, clutching what little I owned in that moment. Inside, the warm glow of the diner did little to chase away the chill settling deep within me. The scent of pumpkin-spiced pancakes and fresh coffee mingled with the low murmur of late-night patrons. I tried to steady my shaking hands as I pushed open the door. Glenda, the waitress with the cherry-shaped earrings and gentle eyes, noticed immediately. She approached with a softness that contrasted sharply with the harshness of the night. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" she asked, her voice a comforting balm. I wanted to tell her everything, to scream that my family had just abandoned me, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in my throat. The diner's warmth wrapped around me, but it wasn't enough to thaw the cold reality that had settled in. As I sat in the booth they had vacated, I noticed my jacket was missing, along with the car keys that had always felt like my tether to home. Panic prickled at the edges of my mind. Was this some cruel joke? Had they driven the car just out of sight? But deep down, I knew the truth. From the kitchen doorway, another waitress whispered, soft enough that I almost missed it, but clear enough to pierce my heart. "They said she's not their responsibility anymore." The words echoed in the diner's walls, loud and unforgiving. I gripped the mug of hot chocolate Glenda had brought me, my fingers trembling, not from the cold, but from anger. The betrayal cut deeper than the chill outside. My world, once steady and familiar, had cracked wide open, leaving me alone in the dark. Outside, the night stretched endlessly, and as I watched their taillights fade into the distance, I vowed silently, I would never let this moment define me. The first place I called home after they left me was behind a gas station dumpster. It wasn't safe, but it was mine. The bitter winter wind whipped through the streets of Hendersonville, North Carolina, turning the snow into sharp little needles that bit at my skin. My thin coat offered little protection, and I clutched a worn copy of Jane Eyre tightly to my chest. That battered book was more than just a story to me. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest places, strength could be found. Days blended into nights as I navigated this new reality. The cold was relentless, and hunger gnawed at me constantly. But amid the harshness, kindness appeared in unexpected forms. Rick, the gruff janitor at the gas station where I scavenged for warmth, caught me shivering one evening. Without a word, he handed me a bag of chips and muttered, "Get somewhere warm before midnight." Cops get twitchy. His voice was rough, but his eyes softened with genuine concern. With Rick's quiet encouragement, I managed to save enough for a bus ticket to Hendersonville. The town was small and peaceful, decked out in modest Christmas decorations that twinkled faintly through the falling snow. It was far from the life I'd known, but it promised a fresh start. Soon I landed a job at a local diner, wiping tables and taking orders under the watchful eyes of the friendly waitress, Jess. Jess had a warmth about her that eased some of my loneliness. We bonded over shared shifts and the simple joys of the season. One chilly December evening, I presented her with a small, homemade candle, my first handcrafted gift. She smiled brightly, her cheer infectious, and gave me a knitted scarf in return. In that exchange, I felt the first true sense of belonging since that terrible night. Working at the diner was tough. My hands were often raw from scrubbing floors, and I learned quickly to mask my vulnerability behind a quiet, steady demeanor. The customers never saw the girl who had been abandoned, or the nights I lay awake in a cramped storage room, clutching that worn book for comfort. But slowly, with each passing day, Hendersonville felt less like an escape and more like a new beginning. The town's gentle rhythm settled around me like a warm blanket, whispering that maybe, just maybe, I could build a life worth living here. By the time spring arrived, I no longer felt like the girl left behind at a diner. I was becoming someone who could face the future head on. It took years to become visible again, not by shouting for attention, but by quietly building something of my own. From a small, cozy apartment tucked above a bookstore in Hendersonville, I poured my heart into a blog that combined local recipes with self-care tips. The soft glow of my laptop screen often kept me company late into the night, and the words I typed were more than just instructions. They were whispers of hope for anyone who felt lost or overlooked. Spring and summer brought more than just warmer weather to Hendersonville. They brought opportunity. The annual Apple Festival became my chance to step out into the community, not as a shadow of my past, but as a hopeful entrepreneur. I sold my handmade candles there, each one carefully poured and scented with simple, comforting aromas like vanilla and cinnamon. The smiles of those who bought them, the heartfelt thank you notes left in my mailbox, became my quiet victories. Jess, ever the encouraging friend, stood by me through it all. We shared laughs between shifts and dreams over coffee. Her belief in me was a balm I hadn't realized I desperately needed. Even as I grew more confident, memories of my past, of sacrifices ignored, of silent dinners and lost scholarships, would creep into the edges of my mind, reminding me of the road I'd traveled. Then came the moment that changed everything. A feature in the local newspaper spotlighted my small business, celebrating the woman who had turned hardship into hope. Orders poured in, not just from neighbors, but from strangers who found something familiar in my story. For the first time, I allowed myself a cautious smile, knowing that this was just the beginning. But the past was never far behind. When the invitation to the Asheville High reunion arrived, my pulse quickened. Not with thoughts of revenge, but with a quiet yearning for redemption. The letter sat on my kitchen table, a symbol of the confrontation and closure that awaited me. In the bustling farmers' markets and quiet corners of Hendersonville, I had rebuilt my life piece by piece. Now it was time to face what I had left behind. Standing beneath the sparkling chandeliers of the Biltmore estate, I took a deep breath. The gardens were in full bloom, the air fragrant with the scent of azaleas and magnolias, and soft music from the string quartet floated around the elegant crowd. It was spring 2023, and the annual Spring Flower Festival was in full swing. I felt a strange mix of confidence and nerves swirling inside me. After 8 long years, I was here. Not as the girl they left behind, but as the woman who had rewritten her own story. I arrived quietly, blending into the crowd with practiced ease, though my eyes searched for the familiar faces I hadn't seen in years. Susan, my stepmother, stood near the wine table, her posture rigid, her eyes darting nervously. She avoided meeting my gaze, pretending to examine the crystal glasses in her hands. Robert, my father, was nearby, his expression unreadable but strained. Grace, my younger sister, looked uncertain, caught between loyalty and curiosity. At first, I stayed on the outskirts, watching as old classmates and neighbors mingled, unaware of who I truly was. Susan, ever proud and status conscious, whispered to a group of women about the girl who hadn't shown up for years. "She's probably just another intern trying to get noticed," she scoffed, her words dripping with disdain. The casual cruelty stung, but I kept silent, letting the moment simmer. Then came the time to reveal myself. As the evening's program moved forward, I was called to the stage as the anonymous sponsor of the festival. a fact I had kept carefully guarded until now. The room fell silent as I stepped into the spotlight, the chandeliers casting a glow that felt like both a blessing and a challenge. "I've stood on the sidelines for too long," I began, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest. "Tonight, I'm here not just as a sponsor, but as someone who has reclaimed her place." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Susan's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly as she finally recognized me. Grace's face softened with surprise, while Robert looked down, unable to meet mine. In that moment, the power shifted. No longer was I the invisible daughter left in a diner parking lot. I was the woman commanding attention, challenging the narrative they thought they controlled. As I stepped off the stage, deliberately ignoring Susan's pleading glance, I knew this was just the beginning. The past had been confronted, but the future was mine to shape, and I was ready to step fully into the spotlight. The dining room was arranged to mend broken bonds, but I had brought the truth to shatter illusions instead. Soft candlelight flickered over polished silverware and crystal glasses, casting delicate shadows on the white linen tablecloth. The scent of trout fillet, a local specialty, mingled with the crisp autumn air drifting in from the open windows of the historic Courthouse restaurant in Asheville. Everything was perfect, too perfect, like a carefully scripted play designed to smooth over years of silence and pain. I sat at the head of the table, calm and composed, though my heart hammered beneath the surface. Across from me, Susan and Robert Carter exchanged uneasy glances. Susan's perfectly manicured hands trembled slightly as she lifted her wine glass, while Robert's jaw clenched, his polite smile strained thin. Beside him, Roger Hemsley, his business partner, watched with an arrogant detachment, his eyes gleaming with a false civility that barely masked his disdain. The conversation began with the usual platitudes, talk of forgiveness, collaboration, and moving forward together. But beneath the surface, tension crackled like electricity. Each word was weighed, measured, and carefully chosen, as if we were all waiting for the other shoe to drop. I cleared my throat, breaking the fragile veneer. From my coat pocket, I withdrew a small recorder and placed it gently on the table. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the device. With deliberate calm, I pressed play. Susan's voice filled the space, cold and unmistakable. "Just leave her there. She'll crawl back eventually. They always do." A collective intake of breath echoed around the table. Susan's hand tightened around her glass until her knuckles whitened. Robert, who had been sipping his water, startled so badly he dropped his silverware with a sharp clatter. Roger's polite smile faltered, his face pale as if the ground had shifted beneath him. The room was thick with shock and unspoken accusations. I watched their faces carefully, seeing the cracks form in their carefully constructed facades. "I came here tonight not to mend what was broken," I said steadily, "but to make one thing clear. I am severing all ties, personal, legal, emotional, everything." From my bag, I pulled out sealed documents and slid them across the table. "This is my formal withdrawal from any further obligations or connections." Susan's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her voice barely a whisper as she begged for reconsideration. But I was resolute. The years of silence, pain, and abandonment had led me to this moment, and there was no turning back. As I stood and gathered my things, I glanced once more at their stunned faces. Without a word, I walked away. The heavy silence that settled behind me was not a defeat. It was closure, a final punctuation mark on a chapter I had long awaited to end. I placed the old bus ticket into the fireplace, watching my past finally disappear into ash. The girl left behind at 17 had truly grown into someone else. The warm afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall trees surrounding my cozy cottage near Asheville, casting dappled shadows across the wooden porch. The scent of freshly baked apple pie mingled with the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds, creating a peaceful symphony that felt worlds away from the cold loneliness I once knew. Inside, the room was filled with laughter and hopeful chatter as a group of young girls gathered around the kitchen table. They listened intently as I shared stories of resilience and self-discovery, offering advice and encouragement drawn from the chapters of my own life. Each one carried her own scars, but in that moment, there was a shared sense of possibility, a bond forged by understanding and support. Jess, my dear friend from Hendersonville, smiled proudly from the corner, her eyes reflecting the joy of witnessing this new chapter unfold. Luna, my loyal dog, lay contentedly by the hearth, a steady presence in a world that had finally found its balance. A brief message from Grace appeared on my phone, a quiet plea for family support. I read it carefully, then responded with kindness but firm boundaries. Some wounds heal only when distance is respected, and I had learned that the hardest choices often lead to the most profound freedom. Later, as the neighborhood picnic unfolded outside, the scent of apple pie baking mingled with the warm summer breeze. Neighbors shared stories and smiles, children played freely under the open sky, and a sense of belonging settled over us all like a gentle embrace. As the flames in the fireplace consumed the last fragments of that worn bus ticket, I felt a deep peace settle within me. It wasn't the triumph of victory over others, but the quiet strength of having chosen myself. The past, with all its pain and hardship, was no longer a chain but a foundation, a soil from which new life could grow. I smiled, truly smiled, knowing that I was finally home. The warmth of that summer afternoon still lingers in my heart. The peace I found wasn't in forgetting the past, but in embracing my own strength. Life teaches us that even when we are left behind, the power to rebuild comes from within. And sometimes, healing begins with choosing ourselves. If we open our hearts to compassion and listen with patience, broken bonds can slowly find new paths to understanding. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections. Thank you for sharing this journey with me.